Heya and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. With the release of Mod 19 came a huge number of changes to the Paladin Healer. In this video I'd like to show you a build on how you can best play the Paladin Healer, at least in my opinion. What powers and feats to run, what gear, what companions, what mounts, etc. Alright, so let's first jump to the powers. So, in our powers, this is generally the setup I run with. These at-wills here, using Cure Wounds as my main heal power for single target when you gotta heal that tank, and using my Valorous Strike as my main at-will to just hit enemies with during downtime when you don't really have much else to do. Then for my encounter powers, the main AoE healing power I use is Divine Shelter. It will essentially give a small barrier to all targets and a small heal. However, when you're running a dungeon where you only have 5 players, you might want to consider running Divine Touch. Along with this, you can use Sacred Weapon as long as you run with its corresponding feat, Enduring Spirit, for that extra divinity regen and that damage resistance for that duration, and you can also run your Circle of Divinity for that increased outgoing healing while you stand within it for that 12 seconds, and it will also restore divinity over time. However, if you're in a situation where your tank takes a lot of damage and you need to heal him quite a lot, you can use Bond of Virtue. Along with this, in our arsenal we have Cleansing Touch. It's good for when you're in a dungeon with lots of negative conditions, and examples in Master Expeditions, and Cleansing Touch is also a slightly better single target heal than our Cure Wounds. If you look here, Cure Wounds is 275 magnitude, whereas Cleansing Touch is 300 magnitude, and the costs you can see there are exactly the same with 40 divinity cost. However, of course, Cleansing Touch will take up an encounter slot, and therefore you will decrease the rate at which you can gain divinity by sacrificing either Sacred Weapon or Circle of Divinity. Other than that, we do have other tools which can help us do DPS, like Burning Light, Smite, Bane. None of them have changed. Banishment is very good when you're in an AoE environment. You can just stun the mobs to prevent them from doing any damage, and then you don't have to actually do any healing. Daily powers, stock standard the same. Shield of Faith is great when everybody is spread out and you just want to give a small buff to everybody and you won't be able to use your Sanctuary. Sanctuary is great instead of Shield of Faith when you know your party members are going to be grouped up and you can protect them and give them that heal. However, it is a cast time. If you press the corresponding key to cast it, you will channel it like this. You can see I'm channeling it on this bar. But as soon as I do a different action, like I want to cast a different power, it automatically cancels it. So you need to keep that in mind. Then Lay on Hands, of course, is our absolute best big heal power. Essentially, you'll just fill the target's HP up to full no matter how much they're damaged. So it's great for healing a tank who's like 1,000,000 HP. They're nearly dead and you just hit this button and then they're full HP. Then with our mechanics, we did get a new change with Mod 19. We got this new Hand of Divinity mechanic, which corresponds to our Channel Divinity. Our Channel Divinity no longer regenerates divinity over time, but it gives the added effect of being able to heal people. If I quickly hit tab and don't target anything, you can see it will target me. It gives me those wings, meaning that I will be the target of my Hand of Divinity. Hand of Divinity is when you hold it down, you can see you can cast it, you can channel it essentially. You can do it up to a maximum of 2.5 seconds, giving it the maximum amount of heal. You can see that it fully shielded me. Now for our class features, generally I just run with Composure for that divinity regen and Aura of Restoration for that extra buff to my heals. However, there is an alternative method to use Aura of Life. It's alright. It actually helps to heal the tanks a little bit more because of that mark, and whoever has that mark, it heals for that extra 75 magnitude. However, they're all relatively small numbers and they won't really impact much. I prefer to just cast less heals and have them be more impactful. A trick you can do is to use Cleansing Touch to heal like the tank, and it will proc your Aura of Life, healing everybody. But keep in mind that heal magnitude is still very small. Then for our feat, Critical Touch, it has changed slightly, that it now procs on Divine Shelter, thus making Divine Shelter a lot better. You can see if I cast it here, it procs Critical Touch. Also, one thing to note, Critical Touch has been changed to only be able to proc when you actually heal targets. You won't be able to proc it like we used to on Valorous Strike anymore. Then we have Prayer of Opportunity, completely reworked since we don't have Channel Divinity anymore. It won't give us Divinity anymore, but it has the effect that essentially when we cast an encounter power, there's a 20% chance we'll get a free cast of our next hand of Divinity. This is actually pretty cool. In order for the new Prayer of Opportunity to be able to proc, you have to actually heal a target. You can't just preemptively heal them by giving them a small shield, like you can see here. If I spam all of my Divine Shelter, it won't proc that Prayer of Opportunity. Prayer of Opportunity is great to be able to heal that tank freely and not costing any Divinity. You can see here Hand of Divinity costs 140 Divinity at 1000 magnitude heal. Then our feats, of course, we use Enduring Spirit to buff our sacred weapon. The other feat, not particularly useful unless you're making some sort of hybrid DPS build. Then Divine Intervention, I generally prefer over the other one, the Coalescence. A Mystery of Warning, of course, is much better than the other one. Essentially, we'll just buff the effectiveness of our Divine Barriers by additional 50%. Okay, so now let's move on to our gear and the actual ratings that you want to be having as a Paladin Healer. So, to contribute to our heals, we need lots of power and lots of outgoing healing. On top of this, the chance that we can critically heal is based on our critical strike and our power. There is a ratio. You need to have 25% more critical strike than your power. So essentially you want your power to be 80% of your critical strike in order to obtain a 50% critical heal chance. When you do critically heal, you get an additional bonus to that heal depending on your crit severity. However, it is dependent on half of your crit severity. So with 117% crit severity there, I'm looking at just 58.5% of an increase on my heal when I do crit compared to when I don't. So that's the power and the crit ratio. Other than that, there are other stats. The most important one here is defense, just to keep up that survivability while you're running your content, so when you do get hit, you don't get completely shredded. On top of this, if you're running Tower of the Mad Mage, it's important to cap that critical avoidance. That's about it for the ratings. Try and get as much power as you can, and after that, try and get as much crit as you can, and of course, try and get as much outgoing healing as you can, and as a last thought, try and get as much crit severity as you can. Just make sure you don't compensate crit for power, or critical severity for power or outgoing healing. So let's go to our ability scores. Our ability scores here, I generally like to just go with dexterity for that crit severity and that wisdom for the outgoing healing. Now for which race to choose, generally a Dragonborn is the best because you'll be able to just choose the slots which you want to put those ability score points into, 2 of any, so 2 into dex and 2 into wisdom. However, I'm running a human and I just put 3 into wisdom. Now for the gear and enchantments and artifacts and the whole shebang or what to run, you literally just want to look for gear with high item level that will basically just give you bonus power and ideally critical strike. For my headpiece, I like to use the Lion Guard's headpiece, which gives that 5k power when your stamina is over 75%. Then we have the Infernal Forged Breastplate, which I like to use just to increase my defense. However, an alternative chest piece is the Sentinel of the Stars Breastplate. Essentially, when you damage or heal a target for 15% of your maximum HP, if I have 500k HP, that means I'm going to have to hit them for 75k in order to get one of these stacks. And this stacks up to a maximum of 5, just increasing that power by 1% per stack. For the arms, the best one here I would say is the Lion Guard's arms because of that increase in power that it gives per stack. For your feat slot, I like to either use the Mighty Storm Stead Purse, giving you that 5000 extra power when your action points are full. However, an alternative one is the Infernal Forged Boots, essentially giving you that same amount of power but after a certain duration in combat. Then for our weapons, you just want to have the highest item level weapons. The Lionheart weapons are pretty good, come from the Tower of the Mad Mage. However, the new best ones I would say for the healer is of course just the Celestial weapon set there, being at a higher item level, having a higher weapon base damage and having a bonus which is not too bad. Then for our rings, I like to either just use the 2 critical strike rings that give 20k there. Alternative ones are the Hydra scale rings. Essentially they will give defense and critical strike, meaning you won't have to use defense in your companion gear. And also there is a ring of rising power. You can only slot one of them. Essentially it will give you crit and critical avoidance. Very good for Tower of the Mad Mage. Essentially when you hit a foe, you'll gain a stack of power for 4 seconds, and this can stack up to 10 times. And then just for our shirt and trousers, you just want the ones with the highest item level. For the actual stat to try and achieve on your gear, you want ones that give crit, basically. Crit and power. Then for our neck and waist slot, you just want the Tiamat set. That's just what I prefer. Gives a 5% boost to outgoing healing. However, with the Tiamat set, you will lose about 30,000 HP, so if you need the HP, use a different set. That's about it. I'm not going to argue with you. I don't really care what set you use. It's just, in my opinion, the Tiamat set is best because it increases your outgoing healing. For our artifacts themselves, I like to use 2 storyteller journals just for that extra HP, and just using the Tiamat's orb just to complete my set. As a primary, I like to use the sigil, gives that little heal over time and gives that extra damage resistance. Then for the actual enchantments to run, in offense slots just run power, in defense slots just run hit point unless you need defense or critical avoidance for Tower of the Mad Mage, and in utility just run darks. They'll give you that extra companion influence and you'll just gain more stats. Alternatively, you could run tacticals, but you're a healer, you can generally keep your own self alive, and so that's entirely your decision. For our armor enchantment, I like to just use a bark shield, increases your survivability, and for our weapon enchantment, I like to use Invorpal, just increases our heals on our crits. We have our feat here, critical touch, essentially guaranteeing a crit on all targets, and thus crit severity, we gain a lot more from it than other healers would. So now let's move on to our companion. With our companions, you ideally want to use an augment companion, which gives you an enhancement bonus of power and also crit. For runestones, of course, you just want them all on max, rank 15s. For companion equipment, you just want all the ones that give you bonuses to crit. And if you need it, I have one here that gives a bonus to defense. Also, if you need critical avoidance for Tower of the Mad Mage, you can switch out one of the pieces. I like to use the Summer Stash because it has an offense slot there as well as the defense, rather than just having double defense, giving that extra power when you use those empowered runestones. In those offense slots, you want those empowered runestones. In defense, whatever stats you need. So this is generally what I run with when I'm not in the Tower of the Mad Mage. For our passive companion slots, you just want all the ones with outgoing healing, so that will be the Neverwinter Guard. You can also switch that out for the Quickling, however the Quickling is very rare and very expensive. Then you have the baby Polar Bear Cob, and then you have the Ion Stone of Radiance, and you have the Rebel Mercenary. In my defense slot, the remaining one, you can either use the Minstrel for extra power, or you can use Splinters for extra crit severity, or you can use what I'm using, the Iron Golem, for defense and more HP. That's it for companions. Let's move to mounts. On our mount tab here, on our current page, doesn't particularly matter what legendary mount power you use here. I like to use the Griffin to give more survivability. I like to use 50k HP here to give myself more survivability. Alternatively, you can use Dominant Force for 10k more power. Then in our stable here, we have our insignias and our insignia bonuses. I like to use just a good few Berserker's Rages. The only reason why I'm using it is because I can put Dominance insignias in all of these slots. You want a Gladiator's Guile or 2 or 3 even, just for that movement speed. I like to use Shepherd's Devotion just to increase the movement speed of my allies when I use a daily. That's about it really, because in the Zariel trial you can never do with enough movement speed. As for alternative insignia bonuses, you could use ones that will heal you over time. And for the actual insignias themselves, I recommend Dominance insignias, giving you that power and companion influence. There are alternatives which are here, which are the brutality ones, giving you power and armor pen. We don't need armor pen at all, so I prefer to just have Dominance. Companion influence will just give you a tiny increase in stats, and thus more power and more crit. Now let's move on to our boons. In our general boon section, you just want all the power, all the HP, the movement speed, the companion influence. For tier 5, you want the outgoing healing and the crit severity. For the master boons, you want blessed resilience or your blessed advantage. You can argue amongst yourself which one's better, I don't really care. I just like to use blessed resilience to help keep the tanks alive. Then for guild boons, you just want power. Alternatively, you could use the crit severity, but I highly recommend power as it's just better overall in the long term. When you don't crit, you'll have better heals. Defense, you can just use whatever you need here. I use HP for more survivability since I already have my defense capped. And utility, you just want the revive sickness if you're running a trial or some such where you know there's a high chance you might die and thus losing HP. Revive sickness will just reduce that amount of HP lost and thus you'll have more survivability. So that's pretty much everything here on the character sheet. Last thing to mention really, I believe, is consumables. The consumables I like to use is mainly just the Wildstorm Elixir and Watermelon Sorbet. Wildstorm Elixir giving that extra 10% crit severity, Watermelon Sorbet giving that extra 10% power. The accuracy is pretty meh. There are alternative ones to Watermelon Sorbet, such as the seed bread here, increasing your power and defense, which is pretty good for us healers. There's also another food called Mushi, which will increase your power and your hit points. As for guild food, Prime Rib is decent, however Sambocade is also very good for that movement speed. And then also for our other potion, the Superior Flask of Potency is good also for just that crit severity and power. Last thing to mention would be our consumables. The consumables that I like to use is Watermelon, Prime Rib, Wildstorm Elixir and Superior Flask of Potency. All 4 of them stack up, one being event food, guild food, just your potion, and then your elixir. Watermelon is not the best since it gives accuracy, whereas food such as seed bread gives power and defense, both being beneficial for us healers. Another good one is the Mushi from the Chinese event, which gives power and HP. Now finally for our overloads, I recommend using the dragon glyphs, essentially the greater one and the lesser one. The greater one giving 10% healing and the lesser one giving 7% healing. Alternative overloads is the Bulwark of Brimstone for more HP, more survivability. Then there's also Devil's Precision for the 5% critical strike. And finally there is also the Resiliency of the Depths for 5% damage resistance. 2 things I did forget to mention was of course our weapon modifications. In our main hand you want to increase your cure wounds by 10%. And for our offhand, we want that critical severity and the HP. Alternatively here, you could take the 2.5k power. And finally, our armor reinforcement kits. I'm currently running with all HP since I need it for the Trial Zariel. You can also use instead the ones that give the power. For our neck, rings and waist, you could use stamina regen jewels. And that's it, I believe. Hopefully this is helpful for you new healers and even for you veterans. If you like what you saw here, consider leaving the video a like. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. If you have any further questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.